Kathryn hesitated right at the entrance of the club while loud music thumped behind the door. This was not the kind of place she had ever imagined herself standing in front of. "Come on, Kathryn, don't start this again," Isolde said with an impatient sigh. She grabbed Kathryn's wrist and gently pulled her toward the entrance before she could back away. "You've been overthinking this since we left the dorm." Kathryn stopped again, forcing Isolde to turn around. "I'm serious," she said quietly, lowering her voice as if someone might hear her confession. "I don't think I should be here. This place doesn't feel right." Isolde stared at her for a moment before shaking her head in disbelief. "You're acting like we're about to commit a crime," she said. "It's just a club. People come here to celebrate, dance, and forget about classes for a few hours. That's all." She had grown up in a Christian home. She could almost hear her mother's voice reminding her that certain environments made it easier to make decisions you later regretted. The thought made her hesitate again. "I'm not going to drink," Kathryn said after a moment, almost as if she were convincing herself. "And I'm definitely not smoking or doing anything crazy." Isolde rolled her eyes with exaggerated drama. "Nobody asked you to," she replied. "You're just here for your birthday. You deserve one night where you stop acting like the responsible one all the time." Finally she nodded. "Okay. But I'm serious about the rules." Isolde's face lit up immediately. "That's the spirit," she said, clapping her hands once before pulling Kathryn through the entrance. Isolde led her through the crowd until they reached a small table near the dance floor. When Kathryn sat down, she instinctively pulled the hem of her short black dress lower, feeling uncomfortable under the flashing lights. "I still don't know how you convinced me to wear this," she muttered, glancing down at the outfit again. Isolde looked her up and down with clear satisfaction. "Because you look amazing in it," she replied. "Honestly, Kathryn, if you could see yourself the way other people do, you wouldn't spend half your time hiding behind oversized sweaters." Kathryn shook her head, embarrassed by the compliment. "That's easy for you to say. You practically live in places like this." "Exactly," Isolde said with a grin. "Which means I know what I'm talking about." Kathryn looked around the room again. Couples danced close together near the center of the floor while others raised their drinks and cheered along with the music. She felt slightly out of place sitting there, as if everyone else had received some unspoken instruction about how to behave in a club while she was still trying to understand the rules. "I feel like everyone is staring at me," she whispered. "That's because you're gorgeous," Isolde replied casually. "Relax. You're allowed to exist without apologizing for it." Kathryn was about to respond when the atmosphere inside the club suddenly shifted. It began near the entrance where a group of girls started shouting excitedly. Their voices rose above the music as they pointed toward the door. "Oh my gosh! Is that really him? No way!" Kathryn frowned and turned toward the commotion. "What's happening?" she asked. Isolde had already followed the noise with her eyes. A knowing smile slowly spread across her face as she leaned back in her chair. "Well, this just got interesting," she murmured. Kathryn followed her gaze toward the entrance, and the moment she saw who had just walked in, her breath caught in her throat. Caleb Height. He didn't need an introduction. Everyone on campus knew who he was. Tall, confident, and effortlessly charming. He carried himself with a kind of relaxed confidence that made people notice him the moment he entered a room. Conversations paused as students turned their heads to watch him move through the crowd. Kathryn quickly looked away, her heart suddenly racing. "Oh no," she whispered under her breath. For the past year she had quietly admired Caleb from a distance. She had never spoken to him before, but she knew exactly who he was. In her imagination she had sometimes pictured silly things like what it might be like if they were friends, or even more than friends. Once or twice she had caught herself imagining a future where they were married with children, and she had laughed at how unrealistic those thoughts were. Now he was here, walking through the club surrounded by people who greeted him like an old friend. Kathryn tried to focus on anything else, but something made her glance up again. Caleb was walking toward their table. Her stomach tightened immediately. "Isolde, why is he coming this way?" Isolde leaned closer, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper. Because I may or may not have told someone it was your birthday tonight. Kathryn turned to stare at her in disbelief. You didn't. Isolde shrugged playfully. Don't panic. Just act normal. Normal. Kathryn repeated quietly. How am I supposed to act normal when the most popular guy on campus is walking straight toward us? Isolde laughed softly and pushed her chair back. That's your problem now, she said, standing up. I'm going to dance before this gets awkward. Wait, Isolde. But her roommate had already disappeared into the moving crowd. Kathryn barely had time to process what was happening before a shadow fell across the table. She looked up slowly and found herself face to face with Caleb Hite. He smiled down at her, completely relaxed, as if approaching strangers in crowded clubs was something he did every day. Happy birthday, he said, his voice deep but friendly. Kathryn blinked in surprise before managing a small smile. Thank you. Caleb pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. For a moment he simply studied her with quiet curiosity. So you're Kathryn, he said. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. You know my name. Isolde talks about you sometimes, he replied. Apparently you're the smartest person in the computer science department. Kathryn laughed softly, embarrassed by the compliment. She exaggerates. Maybe, Caleb said with a small smile. But something tells me she's not completely wrong. The conversation began slowly at first, but it quickly became easier than Kathryn expected. They talked about classes, professors, and how stressful exams could be during the semester. Caleb seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say, and the attention made her forget about the nervous feeling she had when she first walked into the club. As the music continued to pulse through the room and the crowd danced around them, Kathryn realized she was laughing more than she had planned to that night. Caleb eventually stood and offered his hand with an easy smile. Come on, he said. You can't spend your birthday sitting at a table all night. Kathryn looked at his hand, hesitating for just a moment. A quiet voice inside her suggested that maybe she should stay seated and wait for Isolde to return. But another feeling, something curious and exciting, pushed that thought aside. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. She had no idea that this simple decision would lead her down a path she never expected. Kathryn stood there for a moment after placing her hand in Caleb's, almost like she expected something to stop her. Nothing did. The music continued pounding through the club, people were still dancing around them, and the flashing lights kept moving across the crowded room. Caleb simply smiled and gently guided her toward the dance floor as if this was the most natural thing in the world. She had never danced in a place like this before. In fact, she had barely danced at all in her life. But Caleb moved with confidence, and the way he looked at her made her forget the crowd around them. He leaned closer so she could hear him over the music, asking about her classes, her major, and what she wanted to do after college. Kathryn answered shyly at first, but after a few minutes the nervousness slowly began to fade. He made everything feel easy. Caleb laughed when she told him about the long nights she spent studying computer code. He seemed genuinely impressed, even joking that she might end up designing the software he would someday use to run a huge company. That simple compliment warmed her heart more than she expected. For a girl who had always been known as the quiet Christian student who spent most evenings reading or studying, this attention felt strangely exciting. At some point she glanced around the club and noticed that Isolde was nowhere in sight. Her roommate had completely disappeared into the crowd. For a brief moment, Kathryn wondered if she should find her and leave. But Caleb's hand lightly brushed her arm as he guided her away from the dance floor, and the thought disappeared almost immediately. They returned to the table, sitting closer now than before. Caleb leaned back in his chair and studied her with a curious expression. So tell me something honestly, he said. Do you actually enjoy being here, or did your friends force you to come? Kathryn laughed quietly, though there was a hint of truth behind it. A little bit of both, she admitted. This place isn't really my world. Caleb nodded thoughtfully. I figured that. What does that mean? She asked, raising an eyebrow. You just seem different from everyone else here, he replied. Most people walk into a club and immediately grab a drink or head to the dance floor like they own the place. But you've been looking around like you're trying to understand the entire environment first. Kathryn looked down at the table with a small smile. Maybe I am. Don't get me wrong, Caleb continued. Different isn't a bad thing. It's actually refreshing. His words made her heart flutter in a way she wasn't used to. She knew she should keep some distance from him, but his attention felt too good to ignore. The conversation continued easily after that. They talked about school, professors they both disliked, and funny stories about campus life. Kathryn found herself laughing more than she had expected. Hours seemed to pass without her noticing. Eventually Caleb glanced at his phone and stood up slowly. It's getting late, he said. I was actually about to leave. Kathryn felt a strange disappointment when he said that. Oh, she replied softly. Caleb hesitated for a moment before speaking again. Do you want me to drop you back at your dorm? The offer caught her off guard. She knew she could simply wait for Isolde or call one of her other friends, but Caleb was already reaching for his jacket. It's no trouble, he added. My car's right outside. Kathryn paused as that quiet warning returned in her chest. Something inside her whispered that maybe she should stay and find her roommate instead. But the thought of spending more time talking with Caleb pushed that hesitation aside. Okay, she said finally. The night air outside the club was much cooler than she expected. After the loud music and crowded room, the quiet street felt almost surreal. Caleb led her to a sleek black car parked along the curb and opened the passenger door for her. The small gesture made her smile as she climbed inside. As they drove away from the club, the conversation continued just as easily as before. The city lights blurred past the windows while Caleb told her stories about growing up in the area and how he had ended up at the same college. Kathryn listened carefully, occasionally sharing small details about her own life. How her parents were deeply involved in their church and how they had always taught her to live by strong Christian values. Caleb glanced at her briefly when she mentioned that. So you're serious about your faith? He asked. Kathryn nodded without hesitation. Very serious. That's rare, he said. What do you mean? Most people our age don't really think about things like that. She considered his words before replying. My parents raised me to believe that God has a plan for our lives. I try to follow that. Caleb didn't argue or challenge her belief. Instead, he simply nodded and changed the subject, asking about her favorite movies and what she liked to do when she wasn't studying. The drive felt shorter than she expected. When the car slowed to a stop in front of a modern apartment building, Kathryn frowned slightly. This isn't my dorm. Caleb smiled calmly. I know. I just wanted to grab something from my place before I take you back. It'll only take a minute. She hesitated again. Part of her wanted to say no, but Caleb was already stepping out of the car and walking toward the entrance. Come on, he said, glancing back at her. You can wait inside if you want. It's warmer. Kathryn followed him, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling forming in her stomach. The building lobby was quiet and dimly lit. They rode the elevator up to his floor in silence, and when the doors opened, Caleb led her down a short hallway before unlocking the door to his apartment. The space inside was neat and surprisingly calm compared to the noise of the club they had just left. Kathryn stepped inside cautiously while Caleb set his keys on the counter. You can sit if you want, he said casually. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands resting in her lap as she looked around the room. Everything about the situation suddenly felt more real. She was alone in an apartment with a man she had just met a few hours earlier. Caleb returned from the kitchen with 2 bottles of water and handed one to her. Here, he said. You looked thirsty. Thank you, Kathryn replied quietly. They talked again, though the tone of the conversation slowly shifted. Caleb sat closer now, his voice softer, his eyes lingering on her face longer than before. Kathryn could feel her heartbeat speeding up again. At one point he reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "You're really beautiful," he said. Kathryn froze. No one had ever said those words to her like that before. She should have stood up right then. She should have reminded herself of everything she believed and walked out of the apartment. Instead she stayed. The moment stretched between them until Caleb leaned closer and kissed her. For a brief second Kathryn didn't react at all. Her mind felt completely blank. Then reality rushed back all at once, and she pulled away slightly. "Caleb, I don't think we should." But he spoke softly, reassuring her that everything was fine, that they were just two people enjoying each other's company. Kathryn's resistance slowly faded under the warmth of his attention and the emotions she had been trying to ignore all night. That night she crossed a line she had promised herself she would never cross. When everything was over, Kathryn sat quietly on the edge of the bed while tears rolled down her cheeks. Caleb noticed and gently wiped them away, kissing her forehead as he told her she had nothing to be ashamed of. Eventually he drove her back to the dorm. The car ride was mostly silent. When Kathryn stepped out of the car and walked toward the building, she felt like something inside her had changed forever. And for the first time since she had stepped into that club earlier that night, she couldn't stop wondering if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. When Kathryn returned to the dorm that night, the campus was quiet. The laughter and flashing lights of the club felt like a distant memory, but the events of the night refused to leave her mind. Caleb had dropped her off in front of the dorm building without much conversation. He had smiled, told her he would see her around campus, and then driven away while she stood there trying to understand what had just happened. Inside the dorm room, Isolde was already back. She was lying on her bed scrolling through her phone when Kathryn walked in. The moment she saw Kathryn's face, a knowing smile slowly spread across her lips. "Well," Isolde said, sitting up immediately. "Don't just stand there. Tell me everything." Kathryn closed the door behind her and leaned against it, feeling emotionally exhausted. She didn't know where to start, and part of her didn't even want to say the words out loud. But Isolde's curious stare made silence impossible. "We talked for a long time," Kathryn said quietly. Isolde raised an eyebrow. "And?" Kathryn hesitated before continuing. "And then we went to his apartment." Isolde's eyes widened with excitement. "You're kidding." Kathryn looked down at the floor. Her voice became softer. "I shouldn't have gone." Isolde quickly jumped off her bed and walked closer. "Wait. Are you telling me what I think you're telling me?" Kathryn nodded slowly, her throat tightening. "Yes." For a moment Isolde simply stared at her before letting out a dramatic gasp. "Kathryn! That's huge." Kathryn didn't react the way Isolde expected. Instead of smiling or laughing, she walked slowly to her bed and sat down heavily. "I feel strange," she admitted. "I keep thinking about everything my parents taught me. I promised myself I would wait until marriage." Isolde waved her hand dismissively. "Oh please. You're acting like you committed some terrible crime. You're an adult, Kathryn. People date. People sleep together. That's normal." Kathryn didn't respond immediately. She lay down on her bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the night in her mind. Caleb's smile. His voice. The way he reassured her when she hesitated. Somewhere deep inside her chest, a quiet discomfort remained. But over the next few days, that feeling slowly faded. Caleb began texting her almost immediately after that night. At first it was simple messages asking how her day was going or whether she had survived her latest programming assignment. Kathryn found herself smiling every time she saw his name appear on her phone. Soon they were spending more time together on campus. They met between classes, walked across the quad talking about random things, and occasionally studied together in the library. Being around him felt exciting in a way Kathryn had never experienced before. As the weeks passed, her feelings for Caleb grew stronger. And slowly, almost without realizing it, other parts of her life began to change. Kathryn had once started every morning reading her Bible before classes. It was a habit she had kept since high school. But now her mornings were often rushed, especially after late nights talking to Caleb on the phone. At first she told herself she would read later in the day. Then later became tomorrow. And eventually she stopped opening the Bible altogether. The distance between her and her faith grew quietly, almost unnoticed at first. Every time she thought about praying, the memory of that night with Caleb flashed through her mind, bringing a wave of guilt she didn't know how to face. Instead of dealing with it, she pushed the feeling aside and focused on the excitement of her new relationship. She was completely in love with Caleb Haidt. Isolde noticed the change immediately. One evening as Kathryn sat on her bed texting Caleb, Isolde leaned over from her desk and smirked. "You know you've changed a lot in the past few weeks." Kathryn glanced up. "What do you mean?" "You used to spend half your free time reading that Bible of yours," Isolde replied. "Now you spend it staring at your phone waiting for Caleb to text." Kathryn felt a brief flicker of discomfort but shrugged it off. "People change," she said. Isolde chuckled. "That's true. And honestly I think it's good for you. You needed to loosen up a little." Kathryn smiled, though part of her wondered if loosening up had gone further than she ever intended. About a month after the night at the club, Kathryn began noticing something unusual. Her body felt different. At first it was small things. Feeling more tired than usual, struggling to focus in class, and a strange sense of discomfort she couldn't explain. She tried to ignore it, blaming the stress of exams and late-night studying. But then she realized something else. Her period hadn't come. Kathryn tried to dismiss the thought immediately. Her schedule had been hectic lately, and stress could easily affect things like that. She told herself not to panic. But as the days passed, the worry refused to go away. Finally, one evening she mentioned it to Isolde while they were sitting in their dorm room. "I think something might be wrong," Kathryn said quietly. Isolde looked up from her laptop. "What kind of wrong?" Kathryn hesitated before speaking. "My period hasn't come this month." Isolde blinked once before slowly closing her laptop. "Okay," she said calmly. "That can happen sometimes." "I know," Kathryn replied quickly. "It's probably just stress." Isolde studied her for a moment. "Have you taken a test?" Kathryn shook her head immediately. "No. I don't think that's necessary." "Why not?" Isolde asked. Kathryn's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Because I'm scared of what it might say." For a moment the room fell silent. Then Isolde sighed and stood up. "All right. We're not going to sit here guessing all night. Tomorrow we're going to buy a pregnancy test." Kathryn felt her stomach tighten. "Do we have to?" "Yes," Isolde said firmly. "Because if you're not pregnant you'll stop worrying. And if you are, well, then we figure out what to do next." The next day felt like the longest day of Kathryn's life. Every class dragged on forever while her mind raced with possibilities she didn't want to face. By the time evening arrived, she felt completely drained. Isolde returned to the dorm holding a small paper bag. Kathryn's heart dropped immediately. "You bought it?" she asked quietly. Isolde nodded. "It's better to know." Kathryn stared at the bag for a long moment before finally standing up and taking it from her. Her hands were shaking as she walked toward the bathroom. "Just take your time," Isolde said gently. The door closed behind Kathryn. Inside the small bathroom, everything felt strangely silent. She followed the instructions carefully, her heart pounding louder with every passing second. When the test was finished, she placed it on the counter and stared at it, afraid to look too closely. 2 minutes felt like an eternity. Finally she forced herself to check. The result was clear. 2 pink lines. The world tilted. Kathryn collapsed onto the cold tile floor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "No, no, no," she sobbed, clutching her hair. "God, please. I'll do anything. I'll never see him again. I'll go to church every day. Just make it go away. Please don't let this be real." The 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test felt like a death sentence. Kathryn sat on the edge of the bathtub for an hour, the cold air of the dorm bathroom biting at her skin. Her mind was a whirlwind of images. Her father's stern face behind the pulpit, her mother's pride when she left for college, and the Sunday school lessons about fleeing from youthful lusts. "I failed," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I failed everyone." "Okay," Isolde said, crossing her arms. "It's positive. Take a breath, Kat. It's not the end of the world. We live in the 21st century. There are ways to fix this." "Fix this?" Kathryn looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "Isolde, this is a life. I can't just fix it like a broken computer. I have to tell Caleb. He loves me. He told me he did." Isolde bit her lip, looking away. "Kat, Caleb is... Well, he's Caleb. Just go talk to him. See what he says." Kathryn walked to Caleb's apartment building with her heart in her throat. Every step felt like she was walking toward a cliff. She had convinced herself that Caleb would be her hero. In her head, she saw him hugging her, telling her they would get through this, and maybe even proposing. She was young, naive, and desperate for a happy ending to cover her sin. When she reached his door, she heard music and laughter inside. Her hand trembled as she knocked. The door opened, but it wasn't Caleb. It was Saud, the campus's top model. She was wearing one of Caleb's oversized t-shirts, her hair tousled. She looked at Kathryn with a look of pure annoyance. "Can I help you?" Saud asked, leaning against the doorframe. I'm here to see Caleb," Kathryn stammered. "Caleb, your little shadow is here." Saud yelled over her shoulder. Caleb appeared behind her, looking refreshed and completely unbothered. When he saw Kathryn, his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Kat, what are you doing here? I told you I was busy today. I need to talk to you, Caleb. Alone. Please," Kathryn pleaded. Saud rolled her eyes and disappeared back into the apartment. Caleb stepped out into the hallway, closing the door behind him. He didn't move to hug her. He stood there with his arms folded, looking like a man who was already late for something better. "Caleb, I didn't get my period. I took a test today." "Two tests? They're both positive," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. Caleb's face turned into a mask of ice. There was no warmth, no love, no "I'm here for you." "And why are you telling me this?" he asked coldly. Kathryn felt like she had been slapped. "What do you mean? You're the father, Caleb. You're the only man I've ever been with. You took my virginity. You said you'd take care of me." Caleb let out a dry, harsh laugh. "Listen to yourself, Kathryn. We had a few nights of fun. I didn't sign a contract for a family. How do I even know it's mine? Girls like you always play the virgin card when things go wrong." "How can you say that?" she screamed, the tears finally breaking through. "You know it's yours. I gave you everything. I stopped praying for you. I stopped going to church for you. That was your choice, not mine," Caleb said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a threatening hiss. "I'm not responsible for your pregnancy. Go and find the father to the child, because it isn't me. I have a future, Kathryn. I'm going to graduate, I'm going to travel. I'm not letting some church girl with a guilty conscience ruin my life. Caleb, please." She sobbed, reaching for his arm. He pushed her hand away and opened his door. "Do yourself a favor and take that thing out. End it. If you come back here again, I'll have the security guard bar you from the building. Don't ruin your life for a mistake, and definitely don't try to ruin mine." The sound of the door closing was the loudest thing Kathryn had ever heard. She stood in the hallway, her legs shaking so much she had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. The boy she had idolized, the boy she had traded her soul for, had discarded her like trash. She stumbled back to her dorm, the world around her looking gray and ugly. When she told Isolde what happened, her roommate didn't seem surprised. "I told you he was like that, Kat," Isolde said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "He's a player. He's been back with Saud for a week. Look, Caleb is right about one thing. You're only 21. You're in your second year of computer science. You have a whole career ahead of you. You can't be a mother now. I'm not ready to be an auntie or a nanny. And you're definitely not ready for this. I can't kill it, Isolde, Kathryn whispered. Then what? You think your parents are going to throw you a baby shower? Isolde's voice was sharp. Think about the shame, Kathryn. Think about your dad. He's a deacon. You'll be the talk of the town. Your life will be over. Kathryn looked around her room. Her Bible was buried under a pile of Caleb's old hoodies. She felt so far from God that she didn't even think she had the right to ask for help. For the next 2 weeks, Kathryn lived in a fog. She stopped going to classes. She stopped eating. She watched from her window as Caleb walked across the campus quad with sod, laughing as if Kathryn didn't even exist. The escalation of her loneliness was unbearable. Isolde started staying out late, tired of the crying and the heavy atmosphere in the room. Kathryn was truly deeply alone. One night, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were sunken, her skin sallow. She looked like a ghost. She realized that she couldn't hide anymore. The bump would grow. The truth would come out. I have to go home, she whispered to the empty room. I have to tell them. She knew it would be a disaster. She knew her father's heart would break. But she also knew that she couldn't stay in this city where every street corner reminded her of her shame. She packed her bags, leaving behind the red dress and the memories of the club. She was going back to the only place that might take her in, or cast her out forever. The bus ride back to her hometown felt like a journey to a funeral. Kathryn sat by the window, her hand resting on her stomach. It wasn't a flat stomach anymore. There was a small, firm bump that she tried to hide under her oversized denim jacket. She was terrified. Every mile brought her closer to the 2 people she feared most. Her parents. I can't do this, Isolde, Kathryn had whispered before leaving. You have to, Isolde had replied, her voice uncharacteristically cold. I can't have a crying baby in this dorm room next semester, Kat. You need your family. Now, standing in front of her childhood home, the white picket fence looked like prison bars. Her father, Deacon Thomas, was watering the lawn. When he saw her, a huge smile broke across his face. Kathryn, our birthday girl is home early, he shouted, dropping the hose. Mary, quick. Our daughter is here. Her mother ran out, wiping her hands on a dish towel. They hugged her so tight Kathryn felt like she was suffocating. The guilt was a physical weight in her chest. You look pale, honey. Are you eating enough at school? Her mother asked, pulling her into the kitchen. I need to tell you something, Kathryn said. Her voice was shaking so hard she could barely stand. They sat at the wooden dining table, the same table where they had family devotions every single morning of her life. Dad, Mum, I haven't been living the way you raised me, she started, the tears already falling. I went to a club. I met a boy named Caleb. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was louder than the music in the club. Her father's face turned from confusion to a deep, dark red. Her mother just stared at her, her mouth hanging open. Pregnant, her father whispered. The word sounded like a curse. Out of wedlock. My daughter. The girl who led the youth choir. He's not with me, Dad. He told me to get rid of it. He left the city. Her father stood up so fast his chair flipped over. You brought shame to this house, Kathryn. I am a leader in the church. How am I supposed to look the pastor in the eye? How am I supposed to stand on that stage and talk about purity when my own daughter is carrying a bastard child? Thomas, please, her mother cried, reaching for him. No, he yelled. She chose her path. She chose the world over God. If you want to live like the world, then go live in the world. You cannot stay under this roof with that sin growing inside you. Dad, please. I have nowhere to go. Kathryn sobbed, dropping to her knees and grabbing his trousers. I'm sorry. I asked God for forgiveness. Forgiveness has a price, he said, his voice cold and hard. Pack your bags. Now. Kathryn cried until her eyes were swollen shut. Her mother helped her pack in silence, her own tears soaking Kathryn's shirts. When her father wasn't looking, her mother pressed a small envelope of cash into her hand and a piece of paper with an address. "Go to your grandmother's house in the country," her mother whispered, kissing her forehead. "She won't turn you away. I'll pray for you every night, Kathryn. Don't let go of God, even if your father is letting go of you." The house in the country was small and smelled like lavender and old books. Her grandmother, a tiny woman with silver hair and eyes that saw everything, didn't yell. She didn't even look disappointed. She just opened the door wide. "I've been waiting for you," Grandma said softly. "I saw it in a dream. Come in, child. There is soup on the stove." That night, Kathryn couldn't sleep. The cricket sounds outside were lonely. She felt like a failure. She felt like she had ruined her life, her education, and her relationship with her family. She saw her Bible at the bottom of her suitcase. She reached for it. "Why would you want to talk to me?" Kathryn whispered into the dark. "I threw everything away for a boy who didn't even know my middle name. I'm a mess." She opened the Bible to the story of the prodigal son. She read how the father ran to the son while he was still a long way off. He didn't wait for the son to get clean. He ran to him while he still smelled like the pigpen. Kathryn fell off the bed and onto the wooden floor. "God, I'm in the pigpen," she sobbed. "I'm so dirty. I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me alone. I don't need a husband, I don't need a degree right now. I just need you." For the first time in months, the heavy weight on her chest lifted. She didn't hear an audible voice, but she felt a warmth in her heart. "I never left you, Kathryn. I was just waiting for you to turn around." The next few months were a season of pruning. Kathryn worked in her grandmother's garden. She watched her belly grow, but instead of fear, she felt a new sense of responsibility. This baby wasn't just a mistake. It was a soul. "Grandma," Kathryn said one afternoon as they snapped green beans on the porch, "do you think I'll ever be happy again? I mean really happy?" "Joy comes in the morning, honey," Grandma said, smiling. "But remember this. God is a forgiving Father. He will heal the wound, but the scar remains to remind you of His mercy. You have to walk through the consequences, but you don't have to walk through them alone." Kathryn realized that while she couldn't change the past, she could change the future. She started studying her IT textbooks again by candlelight. She prayed for Caleb, not for him to come back, but for his soul to find the peace she had found. She birthed a beautiful baby girl on a rainy Tuesday. She named her Joy. When she held that tiny life in her arms, Kathryn realized that God had turned her greatest shame into her greatest blessing. She was a mother now. She had to be strong. "I'm going back, Grandma," Kathryn said when Joy was 6 months old. "I'm going to finish school. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to show Joy that her mother was a fighter." "That's my girl," Grandma said. Kathryn sent a letter to her parents every single week. For a year there was no reply. But she didn't stop. She told them about Joy's first tooth, her first word. She told them how she was working 2 jobs and going to school at night. Finally a letter came back. It was from her father. It was short, but it was everything. "I was wrong to cast the first stone. Bring my granddaughter home for Christmas. Dad." Kathryn clutched the letter to her chest and cried. The bridge was being rebuilt. She was coming home. 2 years had passed since Kathryn sat in her grandmother's small house, crying over her broken life. Now, looking at her daughter Joy, who was running around the living room with a bright smile, Kathryn felt a peace she never thought she'd find again. "Mama, look," Joy shouted, pointing at a butterfly outside. Kathryn smiled. "It's beautiful, baby. Just like you." Her grandmother walked in, wiping her hands on her apron. "Kathryn, you've done well. You've stayed strong, you've raised this child, and most importantly, you've walked back to God. It's time for you to finish what you started. Go back to school. I will watch Joy." "Are you sure, Grandma?" "It's a lot of work," Kathryn asked, her heart racing. "I am sure. God didn't bring you this far to leave you halfway. Go and be the woman He called you to be." Kathryn returned to a different college in the city. She was no longer the girl in the short red dress. She was a woman who knew the value of her soul. She worked 2 part-time jobs, one at a diner and another cleaning offices, to save every penny for Joy's future. It was during her evening shift at a tech firm's office that she met him. She was scrubbing a desk when a man walked in. He looked tired but had a kind face. This was Simon, the CEO of the firm. "You're still here." "It's late," Simon said, surprised. Kathryn looked up, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I just have 2 more offices to go, sir." "I don't mind the time." Simon sat down. "You're the student intern from the IT department, right? I saw your notes on the server update. They were impressive. Why are you cleaning floors?" Kathryn didn't feel ashamed. "I have a daughter to take care of, sir. I do what I have to do." Simon looked at her for a long time. There was no judgment in his eyes, only respect. "Well, your brain is too good for a mop. Finish your degree, Kathryn. There's a seat in this office waiting for you." Over the next year they became friends. Simon was a strong believer. He didn't push for anything more than friendship. They would sit in his office during her breaks, talking about coding, life and God. One Saturday, Simon invited her and Joy to the park. Watching Simon play with Joy made Kathryn's heart ache. He treated her daughter like a princess. "You're very good with her," Kathryn said as they sat on a bench. Simon looked at Joy, then at Kathryn. "She's easy to love. Just like her mother." Kathryn froze. "Simon, you know my story. You know I messed up. I'm a single mother. I'm not the kind of woman a man like you marries." Simon took her hand gently. "Kathryn, I've been praying. I told God I wanted a woman who loves him more than anything. I saw how you handled your mistakes. I saw how you didn't run away from your consequences, but walked through them with grace. That makes you more beautiful than any woman I've ever met." Kathryn started to cry. "I told God I wasn't deserving of love again." "We aren't deserving of God's love either, but He gives it anyway," Simon whispered. "I'm not asking for a perfect woman. I'm asking for you." Kathryn didn't say yes immediately. She went home and fell on her knees. "Lord," she prayed, "is this real? Is this your mercy?" She felt a warmth in her spirit. It was the same peace she felt when she first asked for forgiveness. She realized that while sin has consequences, God's restoration is total. A few months later, Kathryn stood in the back of the church. This time she wasn't hiding in a big gown. She was wearing a white wedding dress. Her father stood beside her, his eyes red from crying, not from shame this time but from joy. "I'm proud of you, Kathryn," her father whispered. "I'm so sorry I sent you away. You showed me what true repentance looks like." "I love you, Dad," she said, hugging him tightly. As the music started, she walked down the aisle toward Simon. He was standing there with Joy in his arms. The church was full of people, but Kathryn only saw God's hand in everything. She had lost her way in a club. She had lost her pride in an apartment. She had lost her family for a season. But in losing everything, she had found the only thing that mattered: a relationship with a God who never lets go. They exchanged rings and vows. As they walked out of the church as husband and wife, Kathryn looked up at the sky. "Thank you," she whispered. She finally understood. God's rules aren't there to stop our fun. They are there to protect our hearts. She had learned the hard way, but she had reached the finish line. Her life was no longer a story of a mistake. It was a story of a miracle. If you've been touched by Kathryn's journey, remember that it's never too late to seek forgiveness and rebuild your life. Comment below your thoughts on how faith and resilience can guide someone through their hardest moments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories.